Hey everyone, this is Bethany Meadows, your host of Time to Thrive. Today's guest is Adrienne Dorison. She is the CEO and co-founder of Run Like Clockwork, a consultancy known for transforming businesses with its emphasis on operational efficiency and scalability. As a seasoned expert in systems improvement, Adrienne combines her background in Lean Six Sigma with practical strategies for business owners who want to grow without the burnout. Adrienne is co-author of Clockwork, Design Your Business to Run Itself, a book that's become a must-read for entrepreneurs eager to scale sustainably. Adrienne's insights into productivity, delegation, and process improvement are especially valuable for small business owners who want to gain more freedom and profit from their operations. Welcome to the show, Adrienne.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to dig in, but before we do, we have our super random question. So pick a number between 1 and 5.
Okay, 1 and 5. I'm gonna pick 3.
Okay. What gives you butterflies in your stomach?
Oh,
I know, I told you it was super random.
2 things come to mind immediately, probably just because of the recency of them. I went to a Taylor Swift concert recently, and just like live music in general gives me like the butterfly feel good feelings. And like my kids laughing, like I have 2 little girls and just their belly laughs, it's
Oh, you wait for the positive ones. I love that. Take you on top of a mountain and there's a cliff that I could fall off. That would give me butterflies, but I love that.
Butterflies make it's like a happy feeling to me. But
Yeah. All right. What inspired you to co-found Run Like Clockwork? What was the inspiration for that?
yeah, so my background is from the corporate world, actually, and I was doing operational efficiency there. And I left my corporate job. I started a consulting practice on my own and was working doing operational efficiency, but for small business owners. And at the same time, Mike was starting to write a book, my partner, Mike Michalowicz, who was starting to write a book about operational efficiency, but he was looking for an expert who had Lean Six Sigma experience, which I do, and was applying it to small business owners, which that's exactly what I was doing. And so thankfully we had a mutual friend who connected the dots for that and connected us. And so after like many phone calls, many conversations about the manuscript and the book and the frameworks that needed to go in it for small business owners, Mike approached me and asked me if I would want to run the company so that he could go and just write the next book. And I had a really successful consulting practice at the time. And so it really had to feel like a 1 + 1 = 11 type of partnership to me. And with Mike, it really did. And I was like, okay, if I really want to help more people, then it makes more sense to do it under this larger brand. So that's when we started Clockwork and Run Like Clockwork, and no regrets. So
Awesome. A lot of times a new innovation or a new opportunity comes out of a gap that you identified. So were there some gaps that you were seeing in the marketplace that this really filled for business?
yeah, I think that we were very close to first to market to be talking about operational efficiency in a way that small business owners could understand how it applied to them, right? Because when I was in the corporate world, operational efficiency, everyone in the corporate world understands what that means and that it saves them money and that it saves them time, which then saves them money and resources, which then saves them money, which is all they care about, which I understand they're running a business. And so it was actually really interesting for me when I was making the transition to work with small business owners because they didn't know that language. They didn't understand what even operational efficiency was or how it could benefit them. And so I really had to figure out like what is the marketing language of this for a small business owner to help them understand that this is just as critical for them as it is for a larger corporation. And so there was a gap, I think. And I think that the branding of Clockwork and the book itself helped to bridge that, right? Like people understand when you say, like, if you want to run like clockwork, understand like, oh yeah, like I get that. And in the book, we talk about this idea of taking a 4-week unplugged vacation from the business. And I think that they understand that they probably can't do that right now. and they would like to. And so I think that solving that piece in a really practical and simplified way versus talking about it as operational efficiency. Like, no, still to this day, I'm 10 years into teaching operational efficiency to small business owners. And I don't really describe it that way when I'm talking to people because it will just go right over their head, or it's just not as interesting or valuable to them as helping them understand what does that mean in terms of their day to day, right? Like you could step away from the business or not have to work for an extended period of time or not have to micromanage people because they can be autonomous and you have systems that operate without you. And so those are the things that they purple. Yeah.
For the last 4 years, my husband and I have taken 4 weeks and gone to the beach. When the first year we did it, it felt like this is a really long time.
Yeah.
When it goes by in a flash, it highly recommends.
It feels like an eternity because you're so uncomfortable with it at first, right? Like it's so foreign. And now you're like,
they were unplugged the whole time, but you definitely, that's our annual break. And to recharge and reconnect with each other. And I highly recommend it. It's awesome. In Clockwork, you talk about the concept of the queen bee role, which I just love the name. Can you explain what this is and how small business owners can identify it for their own companies?
Yeah, this is one of our more challenging tools for people to wrap their head around sometimes. But so the idea is that in every bee colony, so we were looking for what are the most efficient organizations on the planet. And when we were looking for those, there's always the Toyota, the big corporations that were this efficiency. But we wanted to also look to the natural world. And bees are one of the most efficient organizations on the planet. Like everyone understands their role. The main goal of the colony is survival. And so we're looking at like, how do we take some of those principles and apply them to a business? And so one of the things that we had to identify was that there is something that is the most important thing that's happening. And every other job and role revolves around making sure that thing continues to happen. So for bee colonies, it's the queen bee role. Like her role is to lay the egg. And so if she cannot perform that role anymore, the survival of the colony is at risk. And so none of the other jobs actually matter. It doesn't matter that the nurse bee is helping this other bee survive, right? Or if there's like sweeper bees that like sweep out the cells in a colony to keep it clean. None of that actually matters if the queen bee role is not functioning. And so it's also not about the individual. So sometimes people will think, oh, I'm the queen bee, so therefore like everything, I have to be involved in everything or nothing can happen without me. But when we look again back to nature, like the queen bee role is a role. It's not about the individual. It's about the role that she's playing. And the role that she's playing is the laying of the egg, right? So that's the most important function inside of the business, the most important activity that they do. If she is sick or if she knows that she cannot perform her duties any longer, she will either off herself or the colony will spawn a new queen. And so they understand that it's not about the actual individual bee. It's about, as a unit, as a business, we have to make sure that this thing is continuing to function. And so when we apply it to businesses, we want to use it as an efficiency principle, right? And efficiency is all about how do we do less and get better results. And so we want to think about what is the most important function? What is the most important activity that we do as an organization? And then who helps to facilitate that? And how do all of the other roles play into making sure that thing is supported, making sure that thing is happening? Because if that thing stops happening, then we're in real trouble as an organization. So the way that we have our clients figure it out is we start with what we call the big promise. And the big promise is like your marketing promise or like what you're promising your customers, right? So in the bee colony, like their promise to society, to themselves is survival. And like the laying of the eggs is the how of how they make that happen. So if you can identify like what is my most important promise to our customer and then peel that back a layer and ask yourself, how do we do that? And you want to start eliminating, because there's probably a ton of different hows of how you do that. You want to start eliminating those to identify what's the most important. If we could only do one of these things, could we still deliver on this big promise for our customers? And so the exercise itself can take a little bit of time, but first and foremost, do you know your big promise to your customers? What we like, why they do business with us, why they would choose us over someone else. Usually it's on your website already, or it's like a tagline or something, and you're probably overthinking it and you already know what it is, right? What is this singular promise that you have to customers? And then peel that back and go, okay, and what are all the ways that we do that? All the how? And could we eliminate and get all the way to one most important how? Sure, we can maybe eliminate some of the others or do less of the others, which would be ideal. But this thing cannot be sacrificed because it is the most important way that we deliver on the big promise to the customer.
Awesome. That was a lot.
Oh, it's a lot.
I think, yeah.
We actually have a revised version of the book. If you can see, like I have two different color books. The darker blue is our first version. The lighter blue is our revised version of the Clockwork book. And we rewrote the Queen Bee role section to walk through like more clearly step by step how to do this exercise as a team, because it is business critical to understand what that is. But it takes time sometimes for people to even understand conceptually what it is. And then to figure out, okay, but what is it for us?
It's very much about focus, right? And as entrepreneurs, business owners, we tend not to be the most focused people.
Right.
We're visionaries, we're dreamers, we're rabbit chasers. And another area, something I really struggled to that I want you to speak to. When I started my business 16 years ago, it was just me. And so you're owning everything. It's your baby. And then I got to a point where I need an assistant. Like I'm just drumming here. So I hired an assistant. And so she helped me with some of the lower level stuff that in my mind, it didn't matter a whole lot. Where I ran into trouble is when I started hiring skilled people. As the business scaled and I'm hiring skilled people, I still want to own everything. Yeah. And delegating was just like, oh, it hurts me in my soul because it's not going to be done. I do it. Right. I think a lot of business owners struggle with that, especially in the early stages. Can you speak to delegation, maybe some common mistakes that they make or some tips on how to just get over yourself? I
think it's my favorite topic because it's the most common challenge or common hurdle that we have to cross as we grow as business owners and as we quote unquote clockwork the business or step away from it a little bit more, however you want to, phrase that. So I always talk to our clients about this idea that control and freedom live on a spectrum, right? But they're on opposite sides of the spectrum. Okay. So you have control over here, and then we have freedom over here. And typically what people want, what they say they want, is more freedom. They're like, I want to be able to take the 4-week vacation. Okay, amazing. Let's get started on implementing the systems, training the team, getting to a point where you could do that. But then as soon as we start taking those steps, they start like really holding on to control, right? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting because you said you wanted freedom, but now you're living over here. You're living on the other end of the spectrum. Right. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and acknowledge that you can choose where you want to live on that spectrum. Like I'm not forcing you to do anything as a business owner, but you do need to recognize that you can't live on both sides at the same time, right? So that can give you a little bit more intentionality when you're making decisions or when you are struggling with something or letting something go. It's what do I want more? Do I want to be the person who comes up with every answer or who has to do every single thing? Or do I want to be able to step away? And there are trade-offs. You can't have both. And we can train people safely and effectively so that you feel good about stepping away and having more freedom. But if you think about the control side, complete control would be complete micromanagement, which typically we don't like to do as leaders. And team members don't like to experience it. We can't figure out how to get away from that while also feeling safe, right? There is safety in control because it's getting done the way that I want. And so we have to go through a process of understanding that there are systems that probably need to be put in place. There's information transfer that likely needs to happen. And these things take time. But one of the things that we teach is a framework for delegating things off of your plate. And so when you recognize, okay, I would like to delegate this thing off of my plate, making sure you're checking off these three, I have 3 categories of things that typically come up of where we end up taking things back on or where people can't be autonomous is number 1, do they have enough information to effectively perform the task, get the job done, move the thing forward, right? This is a big one because a lot of times the information lives in your head and you need to transfer it out. It might live in a Google Doc that there's 47 versions of and they don't know which one you want them to use. It might live in a database that they don't have access to. It might live in a system that they've never seen before. And so we have to really question, if I would like them to be able to be autonomous, do they have the information to do a good job? Because it's scary for them to try to be autonomous without information. Right now, they're just operating in the dark, which leads them to just coming back to you and asking a million questions, which is really frustrating for us. We're like, oh my gosh, why can't they just be more proactive? Why can't they just why do they keep asking me questions? They're asking you questions because they probably don't have the information to make a good decision moving forward. The second thing that they need is permission. So they need permission that you want them to make those decisions. And I like to do that formally because they, again, are typically less they're more risk averse than us, right? As entrepreneurs, we're a little bit more risk tolerant than our team members. And we have to remember that they don't want to mess this up. And so what will happen is if they think that they don't have permission to make a decision, they'll just keep coming back to you and asking you the questions, which is really frustrating for you. And you think that they're incapable of doing the job when in actuality, they just think you want to make the decisions. And it's also safer for you to make the decisions. Plus, decision-making is one of the most neurologically taxing things that we can do. And so, of course, why would they not pawn that off on you if you're willing and continuing to do it, right?
Mm.
So really formally telling them, I want you to make all the decisions within this area of responsibility, right? This is yours. You don't need to come to me to ask X, Y, or Z, right? There are times when maybe you haven't figured out how to transfer the information for them to make a good decision yet. And so you're a little bit uncomfortable with certain decisions. And so I would say, hey, you totally have like autonomy to answer all of these, just make all these decisions on your own, except for these 2. Like these 2, I'm still trying to figure out how to effectively transfer to you, but that'll at least give you like more playing room than them coming to you for everything. The other thing that typically happens, people will tell me like, oh, like I gave them permission, but they still keep coming back to me. And I'm like, okay, probably one of 2 things happened. Either 1, they came to you just out of habit and then you answered it, right? Like you really have to retrain yourself too as a leader to go, I totally trust you to make that decision.
But you shouldn't give them knows what that answer is. Yeah.
You got this. Like, that sounds like something that's on your plate now, right? I totally trust you to make that decision. And sometimes, just like they are forgetting and coming to you, sometimes you're forgetting and just answering. And when you answer, they think, she must want to make the decision. So I'm going to keep doing that. So we really have to retrain everyone to make sure that we're moving towards more autonomy. The second reason that they may feel that they don't have permission, even after you've given it to them, it's because they made a decision and then you changed it. So they were like, do you want it done this way or that way, red or black? And they made a decision. They were like, okay, I'm not going to go to Adrienne. I'm going to make this decision. I choose red. And then I go in and I'm like, actually, like we should do black. And then immediately they're like, see, it's their self-trust has been eroded. Their confidence way down. And now they're thinking, obviously, she just wants to make the decisions because I can't even make the right decisions. And so that's where, as leaders, we really need to practice what I think is one of the most undervalued skill sets as a leader, which is restraint. Does it really matter? Like, you got to ask yourself, does it really matter? And if it doesn't, just let it go, right? Like, just because someone is not making the same decision as you does not mean that it is the wrong decision. It just means it's a different decision. And so if it's something that's still in alignment with the company or the values and it's not high stakes, then just let them go. Let them make mistakes. Let them figure it out because that's how they're going to learn. it is something that is high stakes and you do need to change it. I think it's really important that you acknowledge that, hey, I do need to change this decision. And it's because I didn't give you enough information, right? I didn't like, obviously you're like, if you're choosing red over black, it's because I didn't do my job up front when I delegated this and you chose red, but here's the reason that we need to go with black, right? And that needs to be documented so that next time they make a better decision. And so it's really owning the responsibility of, if they made the wrong decision, was it because we didn't give them enough information to make the right one, right? And sometimes you're just figuring that out as you go. And so it's okay.
And every employee is different. Like everybody has their own set of fears and insecurities and whatever that you're dealing with too. And so, for example, if you have somebody who's super defensive, who's like always trying to cover their butt, like they're afraid of getting blamed and finger pointing and that kind of thing, that's something that they just need to know. I have your back no matter what.
Yeah.
If this goes sideways with the client, I have your back. You haven't lost your job.
We're going to be up.
It's about how we're going to fix it now. Like, what the solution. Another thing that I did that I really saw impacts on my team was a lot of times there is a customer who's unhappy with something. Something didn't go right. The printing didn't turn out the way they were expecting or something. And so I sat them all down and based on their title, their level, they were given a budget of which they could handle a sideways issue.
Yeah.
That amount. So at a higher level, maybe it was $1,000. At a lower level, maybe it was a couple $100. Just you have permission to use this budget to make it right with the customer.
I love that. It's what I call guardrails, like it's giving them permission within like some boundaries, but they still have total autonomy. Ritz-Carlton actually does this, and anyone on their team is allowed to solve a customer's problem. I think it's like up to $1,500. And that's because they know the value of their customers, the lifetime value of their customers, and they know the type of customer that they have. And then it's really important for anyone on the team to be able to just like solve the problem. If it's under $1,500, like just solve it, because that's going to make them happier than having to wait or going to I got to go ask my manager. Immediately, they're going to be frustrated. And Ritz-Carlton knows that we trust our people. We trust that you'll make the right decision, but we still have a little bit of guardrails with that $1,500.
Right. And that's the thing is that changed the whole culture when I did that, because it became about owning the situation themselves and that I trust them. Yeah. Because you're putting your money where your mouth is in that situation. You're saying, I trust you to just handle that situation and spend money if needed.
Yeah. I think that's so important to acknowledge that you probably have really clear values for your organization so that they understand like, what it means to solve a problem for someone within our set of values, right? Like we don't just bend over backwards and meet every demand that people have. But if you make a decision of, hey, this is really important, it's in line with our values, I know that I am trusted to make this decision and move. I'm not going to get in trouble for doing this because we've established that this is a guardrail that I have and I can own that. So I love it. And I think I think you're right. Like it absolutely changes the culture of how people operate in their roles. They feel more of a sense of ownership, which probably spreads across their whole role, even if it may be a micro piece of what they do.
Last week, I taught a workshop to a lot in person. Imagine that. I don't know. It's not very often anymore, but I taught a workshop in person and it was a 3-step. I smushed a bunch of things together, but we led with goal setting because that was like foundational. And what I've done is I broke down goals into 9 categories, and those categories include areas of efficiency and productivity. Because I think a lot of times business owners aren't very intentional about those areas. They see the money coming in, they see money going out, but they don't necessarily take the time to figure out how are we going to reduce those expenses, or what areas can we really intentionally work on to create some efficiencies. What are some tips? I know this is your jam. So what are some tips?
My bread and butter. This is a really important one because number one, you're only as efficient as your least efficient person on the team. So You're right. If we haven't investigated those things, if we don't have a really detailed understanding of those things, we're just watching money come in, money go out, but we have no influence over improving it, growing and making better decisions. And I think we all understand that we need to do that when it comes to our money, but our time is more expensive than our money, right? Like our time is actually what influences how we make more money. So why would we not be looking at where our time is going at a really detailed level? And so one of the most important things that we have our clients do, we still do this on our team, is we do like a time study, usually once a quarter, sometimes more, sometimes less, just depending on what's going on. But we need to have that baseline of where is our time actually going, not at a really high level of, oh, I had meetings or I checked my email. But what type of emails? Because is it sales emails? Is it you writing marketing emails? Is it you handling customer support emails? Is it you reading other people's newsletter emails? Is it tech emails that like troubleshooting things for clients, customers? Is it inquiry email? So all of those would lead to different solutions or delegation paths. And so we need to be as detailed as possible when we look at our time. And we typically have our clients do this. They do theirs, and then their whole team traps their time for 3 to 5 days. And we want to use that data to then look at where is there opportunity to create more value in the business, because not everything that we do should be the things that we continue doing. Like when I worked in the corporate world, one of the most frustrating things that people would say to me, like part of my job was to like walk around our manufacturing plant and be curious. Hey, why do you do that way? And they'd be like, oh, it's the way we've always done it. And I'm, is there a better way to do it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, why don't we do that? And they're like, well, the way we've always done it. I'm like, interesting. Cool. And then that was my job to figure out, how do I convince management to create a process change? How do I convince this union worker that it's worth it for him to change the way he's been doing something for 35 years because it'll save the company money and time, right? And so that's my whole job, is like figuring that out. But in small businesses, like we have the opportunity to be more agile, right? Like we can actually make really big shifts, but we have to acknowledge that just because we've always done something doesn't mean we should continue. And so really looking at our time and going, so we have these 4, what we call the 4 T's. Once you do a time study, I want you to look at your each individual activity and ask yourself, could I trash this activity? Could I just stop doing it altogether and it's not actually going to negatively impact the business, right? I think there's probably a lot of things that we keep on our plate just because we've always done them, or we're afraid of what might happen if we do remove it, but we're not even really sure. Typically, we don't have metrics attached to things, and that leads us to just continuing to do things because we've always done them out of fear. What might happen? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you test it for a few weeks? And so I tell people, like, trash something for 3 weeks. If nothing negative happened, like, you can probably stop doing it. So that's number one, is there anything that we could just do? And that can free up some of your time, even if it's 30 minutes a week. Great. Now I can put that towards a more valuable source in the business. The second thing you can do is you can trim activities. So we were looking at your activities and you're going, like I spend an hour on this meeting. Could I spend 30 minutes and then recoup some time? So Parkinson's law states that a task will expand or contract with the amount of time that we give it. And so I typically see this happening with things that, for me personally and some of our clients, like that I had like perfectionist tendencies around, things that I overthink, or things that I have like resistance towards because I want it to be really good, or I've never done it before. I can take way longer to do them than I actually should. So I'm giving myself typically like unlimited amount of time to write the email. And then what's going to happen? I spend way more time on it than I should. So now I put more constraints on things, especially those things that I know I have the tendency to spend too much time on. And so when I know I'm writing a marketing email for our email list, like I only give myself 30 minutes. I back it up to a meeting. So for example, like prior to this, I'm like, oh, I have to get on this interview at 12. So I'm going to start writing the marketing email at 11:30. And guess what? I'm going to be done with it by 12. Give yourself more constraint. I also tell people like to trim every meeting that you have. Like most meetings are set for way longer than they need to be. And it's a really easy way to recoup some time and be even more intentional and efficient on those meetings. So if you have a meeting that's currently an hour, try it for 30 minutes and see if maybe you can even just get it to 40. Okay, maybe 30 doesn't work, but 40, that's better than 60. And we're now recouping some time for everybody. The third thing you can do with an activity is you can transfer it. So you want to be looking at your time study and going, okay, maybe this does need to be done. It's something that is super valuable to the business, super valuable to our customers, but does it need to be done by me? Is it my highest value to the business? Typically, not. There's probably only 2 to 3 things that you do for the business that you should be doing. And everything else is probably delegatable to other people that may even have higher level strengths in those areas than you do. Like we were talking about before, like when you first start your business, you're doing everything, which is really normal and natural, but it doesn't mean you're actually the best person to do all of those things. It just means you have like just enough knowledge to get by. Like you're
dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous enough to keep doing it. And so whenever I'm like, okay, something I don't enjoy doing or something that takes me a really long time because it's probably not within my strengths or energetically it drained me. And so it takes me a long time. Like I'm always looking for opportunities to delegate things, transfer things off of my plate, because then it's actually going to be more fruitful for the business. And that's been true every single time. And then the fourth T that we classify when we're doing the time tracking is what we call treasure. And so what are those really 2, 3, maybe high level activities that are most valuable for you to be doing? You love doing them. You know that they add the most value. They're within your strengths. And everyone on the team should have these, right? Like there are certain people on my team where they shouldn't be doing admin tasks, right? Or they shouldn't be doing things that are customer support related, or they shouldn't be doing things that are graphic design, because those are not their strengths. And so I want to know for every single role, like what are the things you treasure? Because I want more of those to be on your plate. Next quarter, when we do a time tracking, I'm going to be making sure that your treasured time is increasing quarter over quarter, right? Because that's also a retention strategy for me, for team members. If they're adding more value to the company, that's good for us. It's also good for them. People want to feel like they're adding value, but they also get to, as they increase their treasured task time, they're loving their job more. And so it's, if I'm like getting the things off my plate that I don't really love to do because I'm not that good at them, amazing. Now I'm building a career for myself that I actually enjoy. And so every single quarter, I would encourage you to do a time study like this so that you can have a baseline of where we're at and then what we need to do to actually make progress towards having a more efficient, autonomous team.
Wow. This whole episode is just packed. So I can just imagine what the book has in it. Like, I actually have it on my Audible, and I'm going to start listening to it. It's in my queue, and I do listen to books a lot. So as we wrap up the episode, what are 1 or 2, if you can even pick 1 or 2, what are 1 or 2 takeaways that you really want the small business owners listening to this episode to really grab onto?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, if you leave here today, is to take an action. And the action for me is to do a time study. If you go to runlikeclockwork.com/time, you can even get access to like our spreadsheet that we use with our clients for free. It'll help you auto calculate like what you need to be tracking and classifying with these 4 T's and everything. But doing that is going to give you so much information to then do the things that we talked about in terms of delegation, right? It's really hard to delegate anything if you're not really sure where your time is going or what should come off of your plate. And so I think that like number 1 takeaway for me is to get you to do a time tracking. And then number 2, just an easier one to make it a little bit more do this right away. I want you to think about like where you live on that control freedom spectrum and where you really want to be so that you can start like taking some baby steps towards your ideal. I think a lot of times it's just awareness, like even just the awareness of, oh, I want this, but I'm doing this, right? Like you can start to take different steps and react and respond different ways by practicing a little bit of that restraint and going, while I would love to change their decision, I really want more freedom. And does this really matter? No. So I'm going to be closer to the freedom side of my stuff.
Yeah, one big thing for me was just learning to let some things go that I might do different. I'm in creative world. I'm a marketing agency. And the thing is that what I think is the best one, if I send 3 logos to a client, they always pick the one I hate.
Yeah.
Here's my pre-bill. And then there's the one the client picks. They have to learn it's
Classic.
you, right?
Because people are people, right? And so if we think this is the only decision or this is the quote unquote right decision, if there actually is no right decision, there's just different decisions. And so I like to think of my company like as the company instead of would Adrienne Dorison make this decision? That doesn't actually matter. Would Run Like Clockwork make this decision?
Right. There's nothing great.
That's true. Then we're operating within our values and we're just different people, right? We have different thoughts, we have different beliefs, we have different experiences, we have different creative preferences. And so that's okay. That I actually want. I want that diversity of thought on my. And so I have to recognize that just because it's not the same as my decision does not make it wrong. And
we have to teach our clients that too, because a lot of times they're not their target audience, but choose things like they are. So there's that.
Yeah, totally.
There. I appreciate that. So where can people find you? What do you want us to know about you?
Yeah, they can go to runlikeclockwork.com, has all of the book, the podcast, the program. And like I said, if you go to runlikeclockwork.com/time, that's going to give you access to the time study. And so you can also find me on social media. My handle is at Adrienne Dorison on Instagram, Facebook, and I post a lot of additional content there that's maybe helpful for people. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.